I'm going to go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. I'm Angie Jones, VP of Engineering. I focus on AI tools and enablement at Block. This is going to be a fun talk. You picked the right room, okay? And then I also have left enough time for us to have a conversation. So if you think of any questions, kind of keep them in the back of your head or write yourself a little note, and we could chop it up after. Sounds good? All right, how many of you, by show of hands, are old enough to remember the mashup era? Okay, maybe about half of the room. For those of you who don't know, back in the early 2000s, developers were mixing and matching APIs to make all kinds of cool and unexpected applications. And it was such a fun and creative time in web development. One of the most iconic mashups was the combination of Google Maps with Craigslist. How many remember that one? Exactly. So you would search for real estate, and instead of just getting like a boring list of properties, you'd see all of them mapped out on this interactive visual experience. And I know that this doesn't seem revolutionary now, but back then, this totally blew our minds. You see, the developer who created this did so before the Google Maps API was even a thing. It was literally just some dude named Paul mashing stuff up together. And everything was really closed back then. So we're at all things open, and I know all of you can appreciate good open source and open APIs, but back then that wasn't the case. Everything was super closed. So being able to pull from not one but two different vendors to create something new was really sick. So developers, they started mashing up Google Maps with all kinds of things like crime data, local events and concerts, even restaurant reviews. And this excitement and demand is what actually led Google to release the Maps API. They realized the potential of letting developers build on top of their platforms. And once Google opened the door, everyone followed, of course. So other major companies, they started providing APIs too. And this was the beginning of the API economy as we know it today, where open APIs became the norm and developers could build entire ecosystems around these popular services. So another iconic mashup from this era was combining Twitter with Flickr. Who remembers that one? That's OG folks right there. Okay, I got one guy in the front. But back then you could tweet out your latest photos directly from the Flickr app. And y'all, this was before Twitter had photo sharing. So you're on the timeline with pictures. Everybody's just like blown away. And it wasn't long before they started mashing this with YouTube and enabled some video posts on Twitter as well. Now, developers, they got really creative. There was Netflix and a Rotten Tomatoes mashup that showed movie ratings right in your queue. Back when Amazon was a virtual bookstore, who remembers that? Okay. There was one mashup that connected your Amazon purchases with Library Thing, and this helped you organize your book collection. And there were even mashups that scanned your iTunes library, let you know when your favorite artists were coming to town. What a time. There was no shortage of innovation and fun. Now, you may be wondering to yourself, well, if mashups were so amazing, why didn't they last? Yeah, let's talk about a couple of reasons why they kind of fizzled out. So one of the biggest issues with mashups was maintenance. So APIs would change, they get deprecated, or they would even just disappear. So one day, your mashup worked perfectly, the next it was completely broken, right? And keeping up with all of this was a nightmare, especially since most of these mashups were side projects for developers, right? They get excited about an idea. You know how we do. We hack something together, we put it out into the world, and don't talk to me about it anymore, you know? And so because these projects were born out of curiosity rather than commitment, they lacked that long-term support. Well, I really missed the creativity of those days, which is why I am so excited about MCP. It is bringing back the same energy of the mashup era, but in a way that could actually work long term. How many of you have heard of MCP? How many of you have used it? Okay, really good. Okay, so for those who don't know, MCP stands for Model Context Protocol. It's an open standard that lets AI agents talk to different APIs, different tools, different data sources in this clean and consistent way. So you can think of it as a universal adapter. Instead of needing to custom code every integration, you would plug in these things called MCP servers, which are basically wrappers around APIs or something like that. And the agent is just going to know how to interact with them. And this setup makes it super easy to build mashups because everything just plays nicely together right outside of the box. So like I said, MCPs, they work with AI agents. And an AI agent is a system that is going to take actions on your behalf. Think of your AI chatbots, like OG ChatGPT, for example, right? This is conversational. It's going to tell you how to do something. You're going to bring it a problem or ask it to brainstorm or something like that. It's going to give you some ideas, some steps that you can take yourself. AI agents take that a step further by actually doing the thing on your behalf. So they can make API calls. They can generate and execute code. They can also trigger other actions. Now, MCP is not a requirement for AI agents. In fact, there are several companies that are building closed agents that work specifically within their applications. And that's cool. You know, you can describe what you want to do in natural language. The AI just handles it. So there's no need to like hunt around for settings or figure out how to use all of these various applications. And that's extremely helpful. But the second that you need to bring anything outside of that application, you're kind of out of luck. So that's the beauty of MCP. With MCP, agents are not boxed into a specific application. They can connect to any tool or service that exposes an interface via an MCP server. Kind of like the mashup era. But instead of wiring everything together manually, the agent just figures out and does the work for you. We're back. Fun, fast, creative integrations, but now way easier to create. So Anthropic launched MCP last November, and my company, Block, as well as a few others, helped out with that spec. And let me tell y'all, developers are hyped.
Everyone is talking about MCPs. It's gone completely viral.
Yes, the hype is real, and a lot of that is because MCPs are completely open. Anyone can build an MCP server, even if you're not the API provider. There's SDKs to do so in TypeScript, in Java. I'm a Java girl. Any Java people in the room? All right, okay. Kotlin, C#, Python, PHP, Rust. And most of these servers themselves are open source. They're also LLM agnostic, so they can work with any model that supports function calling. And they're also agent agnostic, so you should be able to use a given MCP server with the agent of your choice, given that agent is also MCP compliant. So it's not yet been a year, and there's already this massive ecosystem of MCP servers, more than 6,000 of them, in fact. And the wild part is that only about 10% of these are from the official vendors of those APIs. The rest are made by everyday developers, just like my guy Paul from the Mashup days. So developers everywhere are seeing the potential, and they're jumping on board. And as go the developers, so do the companies. So in the last couple of months or so, maybe about 6 months or so, we've seen an explosion of companies launch support for MCP because they realize we're doing this with or without them, so they might as well join the party. MCPs are on every major tech CEO's minds. It was a major focus of the big conferences this year. I went to Google I/O. I went to OpenAI's Dev Day, several other of these conferences, Microsoft's conferences. GitHub is on board. Everybody is on board and supporting MCPs and building this into their products. So like I said, the hype is real, but let's not rely on hype alone. So let's actually look at some fun MCP mashups. I'm going to use Goose, which is an open source AI agent that's built as an MCP client. And that means that it can work with any of the 6,000 plus MCP servers out there. And also with Goose, it lets you choose the LLM that you want. So we're really seeing the full potential of MCP here. So let's create one of the most popular mashups of the early 2000s, but with MCPs. So I asked Goose to make an interactive map of restaurants nearby. It first uses the Google Maps MCP to get the location, and then to also search for those nearby restaurants. Once it has this data, it uses a developer MCP to write the web page, and then it uses the computer controller MCP to open it in a browser. And there you have it. We have an interactive map of nearby restaurants, all done in about 30 seconds. So with just one natural language prompt, Goose mashed up several different tools. The Google Maps MCP to get the data, the OpenStreetMap API, and Leaflet.js to provide the map tiles. So there's no MCP for that one, but it was able to just use Leaflet.js anyway. The developer MCP to create the web page, and then a computer controller MCP to open the browser. So that's controlling applications on my machine. Y'all, this is the modern day mashup. We're combining data from various APIs and local tools without needing to manually wire these things together. Let's look at another mashup. So here's a Figma design. To access this from my AI agent, I need to add the Figma MCP. So I'm going to install this and provide it with my Figma access token. And I also have a couple of other MCPs enabled here, such as developer and computer controller. So let's make a mashup that asks Goose to take that Figma design and use the developer MCP to actually create the website. And we'll tell it use JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. Okay, so within less than a minute, Goose has mashed together these two MCPs to complete my task. And now I want to mash it with the computer controller MCP to have it open the website for us. And as you can see, the site looks just like the design. So with my MCPs, the agent handles combining the tools, integrating the services, getting them all working together. And this integration is not something that I need to maintain, right? At any given time, I can ask my agent to do something like this. And even if any of these MCP servers have changed, my agent is going to grab the latest version and just figure out how to work with it. So this is why I'm so excited about MCPs. They're dynamic, they're flexible, and y'all, they're just plain fun. I'm really having a blast. Let's see what else we can do with MCP to simplify our developer lives. So how about setting up a new project, which is a practical task for any developer, right? I want to set up this Git diagram project locally, and it has an extensive stack complete with front-end, back-end, database, AI, deployment, you name it. So there are some great instructions here on how to clone the repo, how to install the dependencies, configure the environment, spin up containers, start the database. Exhausting. It's a lot of manual work. I prefer to spend my time on better things. So I'm going to give Goose this repo, and I'm going to have it to do this for me. Now, Goose is using the GitHub MCP to get instructions from the README file for this project. It goes on to clone that repo. It checks if PMPM is installed, which it isn't, so Goose takes care of that for me. Then installs the dependencies, sets up the required environment variables, attempts to spin up a Docker container, but notices that Docker is not running. So it opens Docker, I get a prompt to authenticate, which I don't mind doing manually because, y'all, I'm not giving my password to these bots. So great, Goose notices Docker is running, continues working. The next step is to start the database. So Goose notices that the database isn't set up yet, tries running the script to start it, runs into a little snag because it needs a password. That's okay. Goose will generate that password so that it can continue its work, and now it has the database running. Last step is to start the front-end server. So I go ahead, I test Goose's work by checking localhost in a browser, and voila, that environment is set up in less than 2 minutes, I might add. So Goose finishes off by just letting me know the ports that everything is running on. Also lets me know that I'll need to add some API keys and stuff like that in the .env file, which it could not do because I restricted access with a file called gooseignore, something like gitignore. And so with this GitHub MCP, as well as the developer MCP, we were able to automate common developer tasks right there on the fly. So we've seen some cool mashups, but let's take a step back. Let's look at how all of this actually works. So this is a really simple example of an MCP server. There's an official TypeScript SDK available in the Model Context Protocol GitHub org. However, community members have been making these fast MCP SDKs. And this makes MCP development even simpler. So we create an MCP server instance, we give it a name, we give it a version, and this step is basically setting up your server's identity, all right? And then next, you're gonna want to add tools. So tools are one of the most important aspects of agentic AI, okay? Tool calling is what enables the AI actions to execute the API calls. So we add a name and a description for the tool. Please do not foobar this part, okay? This is really important because this gives your agent context about what this tool is, and this is how the LLM decides, is this a tool that can help solve the user's problem? If it's foobar, I don't know to pick that tool, right? Next are the parameters, and just like a function, if you want a tool to do something, you might need to provide some arguments, right? And this is specifying that 2 numbers are needed when calling this tool, and then you provide a body specifying what happens when this tool is called. And you can add as many of these tools as you need to, but don't do too much, all right? And the reason you don't want to do too much is because your users, like for example, in everything that I showed in the mashups, I was using more than one MCP server. So if you have multiple MCP servers and all of them have multiple tools, all of that information, like the tool definitions, need to get sent to the LLM every time you ask a question or you interact with your agent in some way, okay? So the more that you have, the more context you're eating up. And all of these LLMs have a cap. It's a context window, right? And they have a size on them. So once you start talking too much or sending too much information, the session, the quality starts degrading because it's almost out of space, right? So here's a tool within the GitHub MCP. I wanted to show y'all a real one that fetches the latest commit messages for a given owner in a repo. So the name of this tool is Git Latest Commit. Nice and clean, very explanatory. And there's a nice clear description here, helps the LLM know what's the purpose of this tool. And then in the execute function, there's the API call, and this just returns the latest commit message. So not anything crazy. This is stuff that you all already know all the time, right? Okay. So here's what's going on behind the scenes. We have a user, which is you. We have an agent, which is an MCP client like Goose or Claude Code or Cursor Agent or Codex CLI, Gemini. There's a million. Which y'all using these days? I can't keep up, right? And so this agent has access to tools that are part of the installed MCP servers. And then finally, we have the LLM, which is used to make the decisions. So the user gives the agent a natural language prompt, like asking Goose to set up a project, right? Sounds simple enough, but there's quite a few steps involved. We need to set up the directory. We need to initialize the repo. We need to create a README. We need to commit the changes. So the agent takes the user prompt. It sends it to the LLM, along with the list of those available tools that it has. The list of tools are from all MCP servers that are enabled for that user, right? So again, this list could be quite long. There's several tools in here that are not relevant to the task at hand. So as a user, you can add as many MCPs as you want. I have about probably like 60 added to my Goose client. But I don't enable them all. I only enable the ones that I need for that given session. I keep 3 on by default: memory, developer, computer controller, and the rest I just enable as I need them, right? Because every MCP, again, can have multiple tools, given that LLM this gigantic list of tools, some may even overlap between the MCP servers. Like I have Chrome DevTools installed, but I also have Playwright installed, and I have Selenium MCP server installed. So I have 3 different MCP servers that kind of do the same thing, you know? So you wouldn't want to have all of these enabled at the same time. You're going to confuse the LLM. You're going to also slow your response time, because the more they have to process, the slower they are to respond to you. And you're also going to eat up your LLM tokens, which costs you money. So don't do that. Instead, start the session, enable the MCP service that you need or that you think you need for that given session. And Goose, actually, we added some smarts to Goose such that even if something is disabled, if it thinks it needs that, like for example, if I didn't have maps enabled, but I asked a map or location type question, it recognizes like, oh, you have this other tool, you want me to enable it for you? And I say, yeah, okay, yeah. All right, so the LLM interprets the prompt. It's going to evaluate that list of tools, and then it's going to decide which tool to call, and it's going to share that decision with the agent. So now, here is where those tool descriptions, again, from the MCP are going to come in handy, right? This is giving the LLM enough context. Remember, this is model context protocol. It's given enough context to make a decision on whether to use that tool or not. And then the agent executes the tool call, informs the LLM of the result, but also updates the user on what's going on. Now, that was just one step of the task. Remember, it's quite a few steps to set up the repo. So this loop is going to continue. This is known as an agentic loop. What we just did, that was one turn of the agentic loop. And so this loop is going to continue until the user, your problem is actually solved. And the beauty here is that you don't have to worry about how all of this gets stitched together, right? The LLM is going to dynamically choose the right tools. The agent is going to manage this entire process. So there's lots of places where you can find directories of MCP servers, or as I like to call it, the MCP toy stores, because I quite literally feel like a kid in a candy store every time I go browsing. That's why I have like 60 of them installed. But Gamma AI is a great one. So this one has a report card feature, which I really like. So I go here when I need to suss out an MCP. I would do you a disservice if I didn't share the security vulnerabilities and risks that are associated with MCP servers. Like I said, this is wide open. Paul and them are mashing these things up. They're putting them out on GitHub. It sounds great. You desperately want an MCP server for your Google Drive, for example, right? And so you pull Paul's in, and it could be poor quality. It could be intentionally malicious. You know, there's lots of things that can go wrong here. And so you want to be mindful of that before adding anything. This is executable code that you're adding to your local computer, right? And so you want to keep that in mind and be careful. Gamma AI with this report card feature does an analysis of the server's code, right? Because all of this is open. And so it can detect if, this is an F in security, for example. So this nice little report card is super helpful. And anytime the code is updated in that repo, this report card is regenerated. In Goose, we just added a feature. We haven't released it yet, next release, but we added a feature so that when you add these MCP servers, it'll also do a little scan to make sure that there's nothing malicious happening or that the MCP server is not trying to trick your agent or anything like that. All right. Post MCP is another registry. This one actually is my favorite one because I love how clean the UX is. You can see some indicators here of popularity of an MCP. They show things like the number of downloads, the number of stars on GitHub, stuff like that. And there's now an official MCP registry service. This one is a unified catalog of MCP servers that can be discovered programmatically by your agent. So this was just released, September 8th or so, this was launched. So this one is pretty cool too if you're building agents or you need to access servers programmatically. All right? So with MCPs, we are bringing back that creative spark from the early 2000s, but in a way that is practical for modern software development. So whether it's for productivity or creativity or just plain fun, the flexibility of MCP means that you can do more with less effort. And the coolest part is not just the big companies that are driving this initiative, right? This is developers everywhere that are demanding support for this standard. If this got you curious, I encourage you to try it out. I'm personally having a blast mixing and matching different MCP servers. I use them every day in lots of different contexts, from software development to productivity to just everyday stuff, right? You can start by choosing an MCP client of your choice as your AI agent. Of course, I'm going to recommend Goose because it's open source. You can use it with any LLM you want. I really love that feature because I can even mix and match them at that point. So I can have maybe GPT to do my planning and my brainstorming, and then use one of Claude models to do the execution, right? So this is really powerful for me. Goose is available as both a desktop app as well as a CLI, and it's good for more than just coding, right? You can use any of the MCP servers in there to basically shape it to what you want. We have a company of 12,000 employees, and they are using it across 15 different job functionalities. So sales, marketing, finance, legal, even executive assistants are using this, this agent. Then, after you pick your agent, explore the MCP directory, figure out which MCP service that you want. You're going to find thousands of them already available. But if you happen to want one that's not there, you can make it yourself. There's SDKs available in all of the major languages. So go mash things up, make something fun. Be sure to share it with the community.